Let's talk about the laws. Some of the key legal pieces behind ESL instruction are as follows. Law versus Nichols, as you can see in 1974. This is really basic, and it sounds maybe simplistic, and maybe we take it for granted now, but it's huge, that we really need to consider language difference. We really have to consider that they're learning another language and accommodate for them. So this is all about accommodations that we have to make for students. The next one, about a decade later, was Plyler versus Joe. This is about protecting immigration status. We do not have the right to ask students about that. Now, if we're close with the family or close with students and they trust us to tell us their story, and I've had that happen many times in my life with students I'm working with and families I'm working with, they tell me how they came to the United States, the dangers of what they experienced, maybe family that's back in their home country, what have you. That's fine because we have that relationship and we have that trust built. However, it is not our role to ask for any kind of legal status outside of that trusted teacher-student or teacher-family relationship. Finally, Castaneda versus Picard. That is, again, similar to Law versus Nichols in that we have to provide appropriate language assistance. We need to hire an ESL teacher. We have to have an ESL program. We really have to have things in place to make sure that students have access to that academic material. Okay. Moving on, let's talk about assessment for a little bit. Assessment is a big piece of education, as we know, for all students. And for ELLs, it's a little different than it is for the rest of the students that we serve. We know that all students are required to get assessed in academic proficiency. And right now we have the WKCE. Everybody in third, fourth, and going up through the grades, they're all required to take the WKCE every year. Although all ELLs are as well. Even newcomers, those kids who are just coming to our country, maybe they don't know any English at all. The kids that have been with us less than one academic year, they are not required to take the WKCE. However, all ELLs who have been here more than 1 year are required to every year, just like all of our other students. And you can imagine that's pretty challenging. Imagine taking an academic test, even a fourth grade WKCE in Spanish, if you weren't very proficient in Spanish. It wouldn't really be testing your knowledge of math or science, reading, writing. It would really be testing your knowledge of Spanish. So very challenging. So what do? We know that students have to take these tests, and we know that they have to take other assessments that we have in place in our classrooms. So we offer accommodations for them. And this is right from the DPI website if you wanted to look it up. But I pulled it out of there. We reformatted it because it's a little wordy, I guess, in their document. And this just kind of pulls out the big ones. I'll let you read through these on your own. But these are important to know that these are the legal rights that ELLs can have on any assessment. Okay, because the idea is we do not want language to be the barrier to their achievement. If you have any questions about this, you can ask me, Grace, or perhaps an ESL person in your building, because we're really well versed in these accommodations and we know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Another piece of assessment that's huge for ELLs that other students do not have the requirement of is the linguistic assessment, linguistic proficiency. Students have to be tested in their English growth every year. And we mentioned that a little bit earlier. It's the access test is the one that we use. All ELLs get assessed in that every year. And what we want to see and what the state and federal government wants to see is that we are in fact teaching them English. And they move up from level 1 all the way up to a level 6, hopefully, within their time in our schools. This is what an access report looks like. It's the top and here's the bottom. Broke it into 2 slides for you to really get, hopefully give you a closer look at it. If you have an ELL and you're able to look inside their cumulative folder, you'll see this for every year that they've been in the state, every year that they've been tested by an access test. And obviously you've got the student name, all the details up here. What's important for us to look at is the language proficiency. We're going to talk more about levels in a minute. But what they do is they give them a listening test, a speaking test, a reading test, and a writing test. And then that information is compiled to look at oral language and literacy. And you can see this student listening higher the level, the more proficient. They're level 5, which is pretty typical because listening is an easier skill to acquire. Usually comes first. Speaking is at a 3.5. It's pretty good too because again, that oral language is coming. As we know, it comes first. And the reading and writing is a little lower. Reading is a 1.9 and writing is a 3.4. The bottom of the report, this gets into more nitty-gritty. You can look at the language. I know this is hard to read, so I apologize. But you can look at the language of language arts, the language of math, the language of science and social studies, and then how they use that academic language in writing, and then how they use social and instructional language in speaking. So it breaks down their raw score and it looks at pieces of language control, vocabulary, and linguistic complexity. So it gets pretty technical. If you really want to dig in, you can. As an ESL teacher, I've been fascinated by this because I want to know where certain students are in certain academic areas with their command of academic language. For your general ed classroom teacher, it's maybe not as important to you unless you're a content area teacher. That would be good to know. That in science, the student got 1 out of 9, so they really don't have that science vocabulary yet. So you could really dig into this and think about what that means for your instruction and how you could target. But we'll talk more about instruction later. But just want to give you a quick overview of the Access report. Let's pause, take a couple minutes, and just reflect. There's some guiding questions that might help you. You could write about if you taught any ELLs ever, have you assessed them, what kind of challenges might you have experienced, and what kind of challenges might the students have experienced. If you could please describe and analyze those experiences, and anything else that you want to write as well. Any new learning that you've acquired, you can go back to your handout. You could quick write down here if you'd like, okay? And then if you'd also like to add some new learning to your KWL, so any kind of bullet points, any kind of ahas, anything at all that might be new for you that's starting to make sense, that's useful, that you want to remember.